about marriage. When we get married, he is not gonna be a part of our life. Yes, and you heard me right.
Maybe I just need to give it a little bit more time.
You're going to have to cut him out of your life. That's what Birkan told Laura, with zero hesitation, referring to her best friend Michael, the one person who stuck by her through failed relationships, heartbreak, everything. 1 second, Birkan's painting glass crafts with her. The next, he's rewriting the guest list to her entire future. And what Laura did next after hearing that ultimatum, I still can't believe it. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Forrest sat at Sheena's family dinner table and dropped 3 bombs in under 5 minutes. He's unemployed, he lives off disability, and oh yeah, he'd like to marry their daughter. No career, no social awareness, but every inch the martyr. The self-declared savior of Sheena, who, it turns out, doesn't need saving at all, because the house is beautiful, the family is successful, and everything Forrest believed was a fantasy he made up in his head. Hey, I'm Oliva, and this is Reality Sport. If you've ever had a front row seat to watching someone ignore every red flag in front of them because they're desperate to be loved, you're going to want to stick with this one. Go ahead and subscribe while you're here, and tell me in the comments, can emotional manipulation feel like romance when you're starving for affection? Today's story isn't really about love. It's about the idea of love and what people are willing to trade for it. Friends. Truth. Independence. Dignity. This episode cracks open the moment where insecurity meets strategy, where vulnerability starts looking like control, and where people convince themselves that if they believe hard enough, the red flags will turn pink. There's a specific kind of silence that hits when someone tells you something they should have told you months ago. That's the silence Laura gave Birkan after he casually revealed he had over $50,000 in debt. Not medical debt, not student loans, just regular, unpaid, messy debt, the kind you don't mention unless there's no other way out. And for Laura, who believed she'd finally found a man who could provide and protect her, this wasn't just a red flag. It was a billboard screaming, "You might be the escape plan." Her face didn't crack. Her voice didn't rise. But everything in Laura shifted. You could see her mentally rewinding through every conversation, every sweet line, every future plan. Did he ever really mean it? Or was this whole relationship an emotional Trojan horse to get him a plane ticket, a green card, and someone else's financial stability? Laura is the kind of woman who leans toward love first. She reads romance novels. She wants sweeping gestures, not spreadsheets. But this wasn't fiction. This was someone admitting they hid major financial baggage until it was too late for her to walk away clean. And yet, when she confronts him, when she stands there raw and clearly hurt, how does Birkan respond? Not with accountability. Not even a real explanation. He responds with flirting. "Where are you, man?" she asks, frustrated and trying to hold it together. "You think I'm cute?" He replies with a smirk. She tries to stay angry. She does. But he shifts the energy like he's flipping a light switch, putting his hands on her, playfully closing the distance, turning a confrontation into chemistry. And it works. That's the scary part. Laura freezes in place. Not out of fear, but out of longing. Her body wants the connection. Her heart wants the comfort. And Birkan isn't apologizing. He's seducing. She should be yelling. She's melting. His lips are on hers, pressing her against the wall like the scene out of a novel she's reread 100 times. For a moment, she forgets the debt, the lies, the fact that she's now questioning if he's using her. But under all this passion, the truth is rotting. Because a kiss doesn't pay off $50,000. And charm doesn't erase secrecy. She knows better. Somewhere under the fantasy, Laura knows her gut is telling her to run. But her loneliness is louder. It always has been. She told the cameras once, not long ago, that having a hot Turkish guy kiss her like that, it shuts her brain off. That's not metaphor. That's muscle memory. She's been waiting for someone to make her feel this wanted. And now that it's happening, it's overriding logic faster than she can stop it. But just when Laura's walls were starting to go back up, Birkan kissed them down in 5 seconds flat. Now she's tangled in sheets with a man she barely trusts, twisting fear into attraction and calling it love. The next morning, everything seems magically okay. She says she wants to give it time, wants to see if the flags are truly red, or maybe, just maybe, only a soft shade of pink. But pink doesn't hide poison, and neither does pillow talk. She woke up glowing, that dazed, quiet kind of happy, where the night before doesn't feel like a warning, but a memory she wants to protect. Laura's curled up next to a man who only hours ago confessed a debt so big she should be second-guessing everything. But instead of pulling away, she's leaning in, folding herself even deeper into the illusion that what they have is real. Maybe even romantic, because to Laura, affection has always been currency. The minute Birkan touched her like that, kissed her with purpose, with intensity, it cashed in on parts of her that have longed to be chosen. She tells herself, love is messy. Real men are flawed. Maybe hiding 50 grand in debt and admitting it later is honest? Maybe it's not manipulation. Maybe it's growth. What she doesn't say out loud is that she was terrified he might start pulling away. And the fear of being emotionally abandoned has never sat quietly with her. When Birkan pressed her against the wall, it wasn't just passion. It was reassurance, the unspoken vow that he still wanted her, still saw her, still chose her. And that's all she's ever needed to close her eyes to everything else. She said before that she loves romance novels, the ones where a damaged man gets redeemed by the power of love, the ones where the woman tames the beast, softens the alpha, becomes the reason he changes. And that's the fantasy she's coloring in now. This isn't a man avoiding responsibility. This is her chance to write the story the way she's always pictured it. So when Birkan surprises her with a trip to a nearby Turkish village, somewhere known for handmade crafts and traditional evil eyes, it feels like confirmation. He knows what she enjoys. He knows crafting makes her happy. He planned this for her. She tells the camera that this kind of sweetness is what makes her believe in them again. They laugh. They squish glass beads. They joke about their evil eyes not being perfectly round. He holds her hand at the table. It's all tailored romance. Custom fit to keep her in the sunbeam just long enough to ignore all the shadows. But is it real effort or strategic effort? There's a difference between someone growing with you and someone growing more skilled at keeping you on a leash. Because when Laura brings up his family, the smile fades from Birkan's face. The light around them dims. He stiffens. His answers get clipped. He doesn't want to talk about his parents. Says they're not happy about their relationship. Says he's cut them out. And just like that, the soft-spoken charmer from 10 minutes ago is replaced by someone colder, more controlling. Laura presses gently. Wants to understand. Why? What happened? What do they think of her? He waves it off. Refers to his friends as his real family now. Ends the topic like it's already decided. Because the moment Laura asked about his parents, the sugar turned into claws. Suddenly, this isn't a dreamy date in a Turkish village anymore. It's another softly slammed door, and Laura's standing in front of it, wondering what else he's locked behind his smile. One moment, Laura is trying to understand why Birkan's family isn't a part of his life. The next, she's being told that her own chosen family, Michael, has to go. No discussion. No compromise. Just a calm, firm demand. You cut him out. Period. It takes her a second to register what's happening. They're sitting there in that cute little workshop, still wearing the vacation smiles from earlier, and suddenly the whole mood turns into something colder, sharper, less about bonding and more about drawing battle lines. Birkan doesn't just say he's not close with his parents. He says they disapprove of the relationship. But instead of engaging with that or offering any real insight into why, he pivots instantly, puts the spotlight right onto Michael. And what comes out of his mouth next isn't a request. It's an expectation. He hates their closeness. He knows they've done everything together back home. Dinners, errands, holidays. He doesn't like how Michael looks at her, doesn't trust his intentions. And worst of all, he doesn't think Laura should either. Now, if you don't know the full backstory, here it is in short. Michael is Laura's emotional anchor. He's been by her side through heartaches and highs, and yeah, there were maybe old feelings mixed in once, but nothing ever happened. Nothing real anyway. But that history doesn't matter to Birkan, not because it's threatening, but because it represents something he knows he can't control. See, there's a pattern forming. Debt? Hidden. Parents? Disconnected. Friends? Disqualified. Birkan is rewriting Laura's entire support system, one name at a time. And he's doing it so quietly, so calmly, that it almost feels like he's caring, like he's protecting her. But what he's really doing is isolating her. She pushes back. Finally, not with rage, but with sadness. So, you're giving me the choice? You or him? And then, the quiet part comes out. The part people usually keep stuffed under polite smiles. She doesn't like the way he's twisting this. Doesn't like this side of him. Says it flat out, it changes the way she sees him. But even as she speaks the words, her eyes are searching for the version of him she wants to believe in again. Birkan doesn't yell, doesn't try to fix it. He just stands up, mutters something vague about needing space, and storms off. Leaves her there, alone in a village where she knows nothing and no one. The man she's supposed to marry is stomping away because she wouldn't sacrifice the only person who's never walked out on her. And shockingly, even after being told to choose between love and loyalty, Laura still isn't sure. That moment sits heavy on her. The idea that defending Michael might cost her the relationship, and maybe a part of her believes that's all part of being in love, giving up things, editing life to make room for someone else. But the right person doesn't make you smaller to fit their comfort zone. She's standing at an emotional crossroad with fog in every direction. And for now, instead of turning back or pushing forward, Laura just waits, hoping the man who told her to cut out her best friend will come back sweeter. Like nothing happened. Forrest always thought he was flying across the world to rescue someone. For years, Sheena painted her family as struggling, needy, always asking for money, and Forrest bought into it. Fully. Emotionally. He convinced himself he was the stable one, the provider, the man stepping into a messy situation to offer Sheena the kind of security she'd never had. In his mind, their relationship came with a cape. He wasn't just her fiancé. He was her fixer, her protector, her hero. But the second he stepped off that motorized trike and saw her family's home, the mask cracked. The front yard was landscaped. The house was large, clean, elegant. And behind the house, a functioning business, a bed and breakfast, full of guests and charm, clearly doing well. Forrest's face stumbled before his words could. You could see the confusion. He hadn't planned for this. He hadn't rehearsed what to say if everything Sheena described wasn't even remotely true. She told him the money she sent often helped with fixing the roof, plumbing repairs, making ends meet. But standing in this beautiful home with fresh paint and well-maintained rooms, that narrative started collapsing in real time. There was no scam, no beggar waiting at the end of a tunnel, no desperate family exploiting their golden ticket in America. There was polish, pride, ownership, and Forrest looked out of place. His savior fantasy didn't walk through that front door with him. Sheena introduced him to her father and her sister, both sharp and kind and visibly aware of how awkward this dynamic already felt. And when her dad stepped out wearing a Tommy Hilfiger shirt and a gentle smile, that was the moment. The exact second Forrest realized he was not the one walking in with answers. He was the one walking in with assumptions. And when Sheena's dad walked out smiling in a Tommy Hilfiger shirt, Forrest's entire savior story collapsed. This wasn't a family needing rescue. This was a family needing respect. So now, Forrest, nervous, underprepared, and 7 years into a long-distance relationship, had to come up with a new function. If he wasn't the fixer, what was he? The boyfriend who took too long to visit? The guy who needed Sheena way more than she ever needed him? He started grasping for context, for relevance, for a way to still fit into Sheena's world the way he thought he did before. But the foundation had changed. The more he looked around the house, the more obvious it became. The sacrifices, the reminders of poverty, the emotional stories about needy relatives. Maybe they weren't lies, but they clearly weren't the whole truth either. And worse, she never prepared him for this. Never said, hey, things have improved. Never gave him the chance to recalibrate or let go of the habits he built around being her emotional lifeline. Now, he has to reintroduce himself, not with pride, but with caution. And somehow explain why, after 7 years, he took this long to show up, with nothing but doubts and a duffel bag. By the time Forrest sat down for dinner with Sheena's dad and sister, the damage was already halfway done. He wasn't losing points because of how he looked or acted. He was losing points because of what had already been said. Or more precisely, what Sheena had never clarified. These people were expecting someone steady. Someone worth waiting 7 years for. What they got instead was a man walking into their home with wide eyes, wrong assumptions, and no filter. The meal was beautiful. Homemade. Generous. Not a single cold glance or tension from Sheena's family. Even though they'd have been well within their right to side-eye the stranger their daughter had been dating for almost a decade, without ever showing up in person. But Forrest? He fumbled before the first bite. Instead of warming up, asking questions, expressing appreciation, they got hit with a confession straight out of left field. My mom's afraid this is all a scam. Sheena's sister blinked. Her dad kept his face polite, but his smile froze just enough to make anyone watching flinch. They weren't angry. They weren't defensive. They were confused. Like someone walked into their living room and flat out accused them of being liars, and they just weren't sure how to respond without flipping the table. But they stayed calm, patient, kind even. This family had been framed as money-hungry, fake, manipulative. So far, all they'd done was cook dinner, open their home, and smile at their future son-in-law, even when he said things that should have ended the conversation then and there. That kind of hospitality isn't passiveness. It's dignity. Forrest tried to backpedal. Not me, he implied. It's my mom. He threw her under the bus, softly, hoping it would cushion the blow. But it didn't. You don't say the word scam during your first dinner with your girlfriend's family and walk away unscathed. Especially not when that word echoes years of stereotypes and wounds they've probably heard all before. Still, they let it slide. They said they understood. And still, Forrest kept on talking. He mentioned money. Again. He explained he didn't come sooner because of finances, and while that might technically be true, it didn't make the 7-year delay sound any better. Not when you're sitting in front of a father who's watched his daughter wait over half a decade for a man she believed in. Then, just to make the already dented picture even messier, Forrest decided now was the right time to reveal he's unemployed. Not with quiet introspection. Not in a heart-to-heart. He dropped it like trivia. I'm unemployed right now. Dead silence. Sheena's dad stayed composed, but you could read it in his eyes. The pause, the nod, the casual sip of water, it was all working overtime to cover what he really wanted to say. That his daughter deserves someone who has their life, at the very least, halfway together. That wasn't all. Forrest pressed forward. He told them he was on disability, explained that he struggles with social situations, that talking with new people feels like his skin is on fire, that this dinner, this moment, was incredibly hard for him. And you know what? That was probably the most honest thing he'd said all night. But here's the problem. Honesty without timing is chaos. Because none of these revelations came with effort, with a follow-up, with reassurance. Just, here's what I don't have. Here are the things I can't do. Now please chew your rice while I talk about living with my mom. By now, Sheena had that frozen smile. The one you wear when you're juggling disaster with diplomacy. Forrest wasn't picking up on any of the clues. The glances. The silence. The way her sister shifted in her seat. He didn't know when to stop. And then came the moment. Without warning, without having earned an ounce of peace or progress or possibility, Forrest put his fork down, looked Sheena's dad in the eye, and asked for his blessing. Because right after announcing he's unemployed, he reached across the dinner table for her dad's blessing. It's hard to describe the kind of secondhand embarrassment that wave triggered. You could feel everyone watching from home lean forward, wince, and want to disappear into the couch cushions. It was such a bold move, so wildly tone-deaf. You haven't met the mother. You haven't proven yourself. You've raised everyone's red flags and then asked for a fast pass to the finish line. And yet somehow, her dad didn't laugh, didn't say no, didn't start listing reasons why this was absurd. He stayed measured, respectful, and with the patience of a man who clearly loves his daughter enough to give her room to choose, he said yes, with caveats. The only way to survive is to get a job. Become a real partner. Support her the way she has supported you. It wasn't a glowing endorsement. It was a mercy clause. A test. A final chance to show up like someone who wants to be worthy. Not just seen as worthy by default. But to anyone watching, it might have sounded like approval. That's where people get it twisted. Grace isn't the same as agreement. And politeness is not permission. Forrest mistook that blessing for validation. But the subtext was clear. You're on thin ice, and someone loaned you skates. As the night wound down, Sheena's face said everything. She was proud and horrified all at once, torn between protecting him and quietly screaming into her own plate. Because that dinner wasn't what it looked like. It was a soft warning covered in a hard smile. And Forrest still thought he was the hero of the story. Sheena's dad hadn't blinked through Forrest's awkward intro, didn't flinch at the word scam, and somehow kept his tone even after the unemployment confession. So when he said yes to the blessing, even with stiff conditions, it wasn't about approval. It was an act of restraint, a line drawn lightly in the sand, with full awareness it might have to be carved in stone later. The conditions were clear. Provide for her. Support her. Step up. Because while Sheena had never demanded money from Forrest, her dad made one thing unmistakably known. She supports them sometimes, and she does so willingly. Not out of obligation or manipulation, but out of love, as part of her culture, where taking care of family when you can is simply what you do. No shame in it. No secrecy. It's woven into the fiber of how her family functions. Forrest listened politely, but the moment hung heavy on him because this didn't line up with the story he thought he knew. It wasn't just the house or the business. It was realizing that the funds Sheena occasionally asked to borrow didn't mean her family was in need. It meant they were a community. They lean on each other when someone's better positioned to help. And right now, that someone was Sheena. For years, he assumed she was the one leaning on him, that he was her gateway to a better life. But in reality, she's the one with a career, a property, a family, and roots. He came in as the underdog. And the more he saw, the clearer it became that if anyone's being carried, it's him. And that begged a deeper question, one he hadn't asked himself until now. Why had Sheena let him believe otherwise? Because even if Sheena never flat out lied, there were choices made. Edits. Silences. She knew the picture he had in his head of her life, her family, her needs, and maybe part of her was afraid that if he saw her world for what it really was, stable, supported, not desperate, he'd lose interest. Maybe she worried he needed to feel needed. And she was willing to dim the lights just enough to keep the fantasy alive. It's not a scam. It's image management, emotional buffering, and yes, a little manipulation. For someone who's been dating her for this long, Forrest should know her better. But the truth is, their relationship has existed more through text and static screens than in real life, which means every sentence could be polished. Every moment could be filtered. And now that he's standing in her actual world, the truth doesn't need to be said. It's just visible. Forrest isn't mad. Not visibly. But he is disoriented. You can see it in his posture, how his voice softens, how he nods too quickly like he's catching up in real time. His gap year of understanding is showing. And he's losing his grip on the one role he was good at, being her helper. Because when a man builds an identity around being useful, and that usefulness evaporates in front of people who clearly don't need saving, all that's left is exposure. Raw, unarmed exposure. The blessing meant something to Forrest. But not what he hoped for. It was polite permission to keep trying, not a green light to get comfortable. And even after all this, he wasn't done pretending there was solid ground beneath him. He still had one more test to pass. Tomorrow, Molly arrives. His mom. The woman who's been whispering doubts since day one. The one who never liked that Sheena sent money home. The one who thinks Sheena's holding 2 passports, 3 secrets, and a secret family business built on Forrest's disability check. Molly doesn't take cultural nuance. She takes receipts, sharp words, and a spreadsheet of everything she thinks proves Sheena's playing her son. Forrest isn't ready. You can see it in his eyes at the mention of her. He knows his mom will scrutinize every hug, every gesture, every family photo on the wall. And he knows Sheena won't bite her tongue forever. The gap between these 2 women is wide, and Forrest is about to fall straight through it. He calls the upcoming meeting a big deal, but it's so much more than that. It's not just a visit. It's a collision course. Where suspicions meet hospitality, where half-truths meet hard questions, where years of long distance make-believe run face-first into a mother's paranoia and a girlfriend's pride. Tension isn't building. It's already here. Tomorrow isn't going to be a meet and greet. It's going to be a reckoning. If Forrest thought dinner with her dad was rough, wait till Molly shows up with receipts and rage. Because while her dad asks gentle questions wrapped in courtesy, Molly won't. She's coming in as the prosecution. And Sheena? She's tired of being on trial. Whatever fantasy Forrest had left about being the solid one in this relationship is already unraveling. And if Molly tears through what's left, he'll be stuck choosing between the woman who raised him and the woman who's been nothing like he imagined. Silence might have bought him one more night of peace. But the next table won't be filled with warm food and kind eyes. It'll be judgment, tension, and questions that no one is ready to answer. There's a specific kind of heartbreak that comes not from betrayal, but from realizing you betrayed your own instincts. Laura knew something was off. She felt it when Birkan dropped the debt bomb. She felt it when his charm shifted into control. And she absolutely felt it when he told her, with chilling calm, that if they get married, her best friend Michael won't be in their lives at all. A healthy relationship doesn't require pruning your support system. It doesn't come with ultimatums disguised as romance. But Laura, caught somewhere between self-worth and desperation, convinced herself that sexual chemistry and sweet moments meant progress. That maybe his intense reactions meant passion, not possession. That maybe giving up Michael was the price of love. And when you're starved for affection, even controlling behavior can look like commitment. Because this isn't just about what Birkan is doing. It's about what Laura's letting happen. Slowly, she's editing her life to match his picture. Pushing aside warning signs to make room for fantasy. And worst of all, she's starting to believe it's all her choice. That choosing him over her best friend is romantic, mature, evolved, but control doesn't always yell. Sometimes it whispers in your ear while kissing your neck. And Laura? She's listening. Across the world, Forrest is dealing with the same mask, just flipped. Laura is ignoring too many signs. Forrest is misreading all of them. He built this whole storyline where Sheena was the damsel in distress, told everyone he was coming to save her, get her out of financial need, away from the weight of her family expectations. But none of it was real. Sheena never needed saving. He needed purpose. And that's the kind of loneliness that gets dangerous when you wrap it in heroism and call it love. Because Forrest wasn't coming to support Sheena. He was coming to anchor himself. Thinking she would give him security the system wouldn't. That her neediness would create stability. He didn't expect her family to be functional, respectable, even thriving. And now that they are, and now that he's been handed a conditional blessing, he's left wondering what role he plays anymore. It's not just the unemployment. It's the emotional math. Forrest is realizing that he's not the one propping up this relationship. Sheena is. And next comes the test none of them are truly ready for. Molly is boarding a plane. And she's not coming with curiosity. She's coming with conclusions. Her son flew thousands of miles for a woman who sends money home, lives with extended family, and didn't insist he get a job before proposing. Molly doesn't trust people who smile too hard. She looks for cracks, waits in silence, and strikes with certainty. And Sheena's family? They've never met a Molly before. Sheena's kindness will wear thin. Her father's politeness won't run forever. The hospitality this family gave Forrest is not elastic. It will snap if they're pushed too far. We've seen the setup, the sweet moments, the crafted scenes, the bumpy but quiet blending of cultures. That's over now. Because once Forrest's mom enters the picture, so does escalation. She'll ask what Forrest wouldn't, point out what he didn't notice. And in that process, the cracks in Sheena's version of events, the filters, the gently tweaked backstories, might not survive. What happens when Sheena is confronted by someone immune to charm? What happens when Forrest is forced to choose between the woman who's cared for him his whole life and the one who only recently became a reality? This is the point where perception and truth start their final battle. And where love either grows up or falls apart. For Laura, that moment is coming too. She can only keep rewriting Birkan's behavior for so long. Eventually, the gut she keeps trying to ignore will tie her stomach in knots she can't untangle. And when a man demands you, cut out the person who's always had your back, That's not romance. That's a warning. Sooner or later, someone's going to have to say it out loud. You don't build a future by burning your past. And you can't fall for someone who keeps proving they'd rather have control than connection. Both of these love stories started with hope. But now, they're clinging to excuses. Laura is kissing red flags like they're roses. And Forrest is realizing he's not the hero in his own love story. But wait till Molly shows up. That's where it really begins.